There are some who insist that the railroad tracks should be removed so that a trail can be put in their place. Others contend that the solution can be found where we can have both a train and trails. This will require some flexibility on the trail location. What is your position on this? Starting this question with Dan Hauser.
Well, as I've always stated, I strongly support keeping the option open for a rail system, not only around Humboldt Bay, but connecting us to the south. The option of rails and trails is one, again, that I've supported back when I was the executive director of the North Coast Railroad Authority. I worked with the Arcata Mad River Railroad folks to make sure that that trail was devoted, that line was devoted to rail use because it was no longer viable as a rail option. But the rail option around Humboldt Bay is one where a shared facility can be developed, especially between Braycut and the city of Arcata. I strongly support putting a trail alongside the rail, but I'm not willing to give up on the option of keeping the rail lines in place.
Well, I touched on this earlier. I would love to see our communities linked by a trail around our bay, and I'm also for rail. I'd like to see an excursion train, so I think that there can be both rail and trail. It's just going to be, it'll take some compromise in the community. There will be a lot of input, I'm sure, about that subject. But I think it's time that we get going on it. I mean, we keep on talking about it. It's been talked about for years, but nothing seems to be done. I have seen that the Timber Heritage Society actually got the speeder going. No, I actually took a ride on that. That was very informative. It was actually not advertised very well, and it was sold out like a month ahead of time. So there is obviously, you know, interest in having an excursion train, and I think that was evidenced by the speeder. And so I would like to see both rail and trail.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Next is Susan.
Thank you. Okay. I basically concur with having rail and trail around Humboldt Bay between Samoa and Eureka, especially with the use of the speeder, because I think the two are fairly compatible. The stretch south of Eureka, I would favor rail banking and turning that area into a trail. As I said, I don't foresee the rail coming back to life in the near future. If we rail banked that area and created a trail, it could go all the way down past CR, past, you know, Ferndale, Scotia. A lot of it travels right along the bay. There's actually a mile-long tunnel along there that's straight as a rail. I mean, you can look at one end and see the other end of it. It would be a wonderful area for people to be able to walk and ride their bikes.
Thank you, Susan. And completing this question session will be Mike Wilson.
Like everybody else, I want it all. Rail and trail. The question really is, how much does it cost? How much does it cost to build, and how much does it cost to maintain? I think we have to be realistic about that, and we have done some studies on that, even in smaller sections, that show almost an order of magnitude difference between just trail and trail. And we have to be cognizant of that in our decision-making process, and we have to be realistic. I'm proud of the fact that I was a member of a broad multi-agency task force that basically put together the plan for moving between Arcata and Braycut. And it was a great compromise, and it basically made it so that the city of Arcata could get $1 million in trail planning grant money from the Coastal Conservancy. So they're committed. We have a committed agency that wants to build that trail. Half of that's for the coastal trail, half of it's for design and implementation, design and permitting of the trail piece that goes halfway between Eureka and Arcata, and that's great progress. I'm proud of that. I've also been involved in a multi-agency group that helped put together the rail and trail guidelines with the NCRA over the last 6 months, and actually the last year, and that's been a lot of hard work from a lot of people. None of these things are just by myself, they are with a lot of folks. The tourist train is a great vision. I'd love to see it happen. I think we all should do our best to move forward in trying to do that, and I believe that the compromise that was made for the section of the trail that we're working on between Eureka and Arcata allows for some time for us to look at that. But really, we have to look at the cost, the benefits, and the timelines in terms of how we can move this forward. It's a great vision, but I think we've got to keep our feet on the ground.
Thank you. And there's an arcane subject to some people called the MLPA, Marine Life Protection Act, that raised its head on this coast in, I believe, 2000, and we rejected the initial concept, and the fishing game retracted it, but it came back with a new effort this last year. So the question is, what do you know about the MLPA and and the progress, and what do you feel about our regional efforts to minimize its negative impacts? And with this series of questions, it will be Richard Marks starting off, followed by Susan, then Mike Wilson, and finally Dan Hauser. Richard.
Okay, as far as the Marine Life Protection Act initiative, I am concerned that they're trying to create marine protected areas that might not be cohesive to our fishermen up here on the North Coast. I've talked to various fishermen who have concerns about the process. They figure that data is not being collected in a fashion that is all scientific, and that some of these areas that may be will affect some of our fishermen's fish baskets where they make their living. I think there needs to be a lot more, of course, communication between all the stakeholders. And right now I don't see a reason for us to have the marine protected areas.
Thank you, Richard. And Susan, MLPA.
Okay.
Marcus.
Okay, the MLPA was a legislative act, and unfortunately I don't see us getting out of it. It has wreaked financial havoc in some areas, and yes, the fishermen here are very concerned about its effects. The best hope I think we have is for the fishermen to get put together an alternative plan to present to the MPA folks, who are in the process of putting together a plan of some sort of their own using what they call best available science. They have less than a year to gather all of the information on fishing on the area from, where is it, Point Arena up to the Oregon coast. There is a lot of information already available, but compiling it and coming up with something reasonable is a big charge. I think that this area really is not appropriate for a marine protected area just because we already have a lot of restrictions on fishing. The fishermen locally honor them, and best available science locally says that they are not overfishing this area.
Thank you, Susan. Next is Mike Wilson.
Sure.
Well, I'll echo the criticism of the process with regards to the MLPA. I will say, though, that I have seen marine life protected areas that have worked. They do exist, and I'm not saying, but what I am saying is in those areas, and in my experience, it required good, sound data, and the other thing it really required was the resource users, in this case the fishermen, had to really buy into it, had to believe it in order for it to work. And I truly believe that the only way for the MLPA to be functional here is if our resource users and the people who make their living off of the fish off our coast, they have to believe in it and want to see it. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
On the politics of the MLPA, one of the things that really bothers me is that it's being funded by a private organization, not by the governmental agencies. And secondly, no one's taking into account the fact that the Department of Fish and Game, which has been further emasculated by this governor, doesn't have the ability to enforce the rules and regulations of the MLPA. Besides that, I do want to compliment the Commission and Commissioner Wilson in particular for helping coordinate all of the local governmental agencies